you need an interface to your business. And if your business is legitimately using three, four, five different products to conduct business, it has to be consolidated in order to do what we're talking about. And artificial intelligence models is no exception. Like you must put them into one place as best you can in order to give it the highest probability of giving you actionable insights or meaningful choices.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Connected Advisor. I'm your host, Kyle Van Pelt, co-founder at Milemarker. And today I am joined, this is a special episode for me. I am joined by Kailash Duraiswami. Kailash is the CTO at Milemarker, the company that I co-founded. And I am super excited to have him join the show today to talk about all things data, AI, and wealth management. Kailash, thanks for joining the show.
Super glad. I know we talked about it for a long time, so glad we could finally get our schedules to align.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Harder than you'd think, everybody. All right, Kailash, I ask everybody the same question, and you're going to be no different. You're going to be no different. So I've had hundreds of conversations like this one, and our industry is unique. I think everybody has their own unique path to this space. Some people follow really traditional footsteps, maybe family footsteps or things like that. Some people come in through the side door. They were doing something completely different and they kind of found their way into the wealth management industry. But what we found is that everybody, whether their path is traditional or untraditional, has what we call a money moment. And that's a moment in your life where the light bulb kind of clicks and you decide that this is what you want to do. So for you, what was your money moment that led you to sitting in this chair?
Yeah, I was thinking about this. It's really funny. I don't think we've ever talked about this. So when I was in high school, I actually was rejected from every college I applied to, except I got waitlisted at Emory. And that was a big scare for me. And I kind of decided in that moment that I needed to be financially independent and I needed to be financially responsible because I thought the game of getting good grades and doing a job and climbing up a ladder, it's never going to work for me. I kind of had this awakening, like I need to just figure out a way to be financially strong on my own and understand how to create wealth for myself because I'm not going to be able to do it the same way as everyone else. And that was very early. So that was like when I graduated college or high school. And after that, I became really interested in financial markets and investing. And when I graduated, I actually started an RIA right out of high school.
No
right
way.
out of college. Right out of college. Yeah. I was the youngest advisor in FINRA. And I did my Series 65 and I did my Series 6 and 7 and everything. And I did an RIA and I invested money from like my family friends and my family, and the returns were really good. It was more of an active strategy.
Yeah.
But I lacked maturity completely. So like anyone else would never give me any money, obviously. But I was really in the industry really early. And I sort of learned, I worked with a lawyer to do my power of attorney trading and like I did everything. I mean, I really ran that business, but I had no weights. Like my performance fee was like $500 because I didn't have any. My AUM was like $2,000. No, it was pretty good, but like I thought it was going to be this launching point, but I lacked maturity. I didn't have the right personality, definitely then. But that's how I started in this industry. I mean, right from the beginning, I've only worked in finance my whole career, and then I became a software developer because I felt it gave me more flexibility to be an entrepreneur. I felt that a lot of people who succeeded in the RIA space were like my age now, mid 30s. And when I was in my early 20s, that was impossible for me to wait that long. So I kind of joined and did consulting and engineering for financial firms right after that. And that's how it led me to here. And of course, in that journey, I started the company Pantenix, which was acquired by Orion. And that's really what leads me here is a lot of experimentation as a founder in that space. But I know the language and experiences of advisors really well because I did it myself.
Man, I did not know that. So that's hilarious that you can work with somebody as close as we do and not always know the full story. I mean, I knew you were involved in the finance world before you came here. I didn't know you started your own RIA. That's amazing.
I probably started an RIA. I think it was within like 1 or 2 years after the designation was created. I mean, I was really early into it because I went to a lawyer and was like, okay, I want to do this like active trading. I was like, how much does it cost to start a hedge fund? He's like, dude, it's a lot. Like the legal fees and everything, it's like a lot. So, but they made this thing called the RIA, and it's actually much cheaper. And that's how I did it.
That's amazing. So you really wanted to be more like a hedge fund. You weren't looking to go be a financial advisor and, do
No,
planning and everything for everybody. You just needed some vehicle to run this active trading strategy.
right. Yeah. And it was this concentrated value. I only owned like 4 stocks, and it was like penny stocks. I had this crazy insurance company from Florida that was like 500 million market cap, and it would go crazy up, crazy down. But I was like, who cares? And I mean, the returns were good, but it was like, no one would stomach that. If I would tell, they'd be like, what's in the holding? I'd be like, oh, this insurance company you've never heard of. And look at the, look at the beta and standard deviation on this thing. Like you'd get seasick.
The Kailash roller coaster. Sounds amazing. Well, okay. So I've got to ask you though, because this is going to tie into what we're going to talk about, but how would you do the analysis to find these 4 or 5 positions that you would put into your active trading strategy?
Yeah, it was totally industry agnostic, bottom up, low price to earnings ratio, then look at everything, look at the balance sheet, analyze everything, come up with like what's trading below. Because, when you have no money, you can go into these positions that are like no one else can. So I would
Right.
buy stuff that's like trading under cash, trading under, book value. And
Yeah.
then I would just buy and hold. It was kind of that more classic Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham type trading, like really old school. Yeah.
Were you manually looking at all of this stuff, or did
I
you?
would Google finance, sort by PE ratio inverted, look at every single one.
Man, that's amazing. That's amazing. What a story. That's awesome. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about Pantenix and then how that sort of leads to Milemarker. So for those who don't know, what was Pantenix?
Pantenix now it's Orion Vision. It was a product that allowed financial advisor, RAs, mostly the operations staff, to manually teach a computer vision model how to read PDFs. So you could teach it how to basically look at a file, and then you could teach it what types of transactions you wanted out of it, what kind of date you wanted, and different things like the account number and stuff. And you would teach it how to read it, and then one time, and then after that, it could get like a very good heuristic where even if stuff changed a little bit, rebranding, they laid it out differently, it could compensate for that. And it would be able to extract the data you wanted, and then it would transform it into a file that you could import into Black Diamond or Orion or Tamarack or whatever you were using. So that is kind of the general case of the technology. But what it did in practice was for alternative investments. So people who invest in these positions through partnerships, whether it was private equity, hedge fund, even oil and gas. I mean, a lot of that stuff was popular on Pantenix. You just teach it how to read one file one time for one of your clients, and then you could drop 50, 60 every month, and it would do everything for you. So my demo basically was like, I would show 100 files that we generated, and I would ask them, how long would this take you to do, given your meetings, given your real workflow, given like your honest day's work? They would always say like 4 hours, 8 hours, whatever, a full day. And I would just drag and drop, and it would be done in like 30 seconds. And like, that was the whole demo. And everyone who had the problem understood how valuable that was to just get through that correctly. And, very fortunate. There was never a number that was wrong. There was never like any kind of accuracy issue, because by the time we started the company, the issue of reading from a PDF was really solved. And then very fortunate on that journey. We were exposed to Orion really early. Actually, they were one of the very first people somehow that had heard about what I was doing, and they wanted to try it out. And it was like so early, like I had to like manually create a login for them. I remember all this stuff, and they looked around, they really liked it, and they were along that journey for a long time. And eventually some of their more meaningful customers had really good experiences. And then we came to the table to see like maybe they would do a bunch of licenses, but the economics were sort of like, why don't we just buy this?
Yeah, that's great. Kind of leads us to where we're at today. So you solved this unique and interesting pain point of, there's no easy way to move data from a lot of these alternative investments into a place where advisors do their work. And that, seems to be the case with a lot of pieces of technology today. So Milemarker, we are a firm that pulls data from all different types of places into one place, into a data lake or a data warehouse, however you want to call it. As somebody who built a piece of technology that was pulling data off of PDFs and making it portable to be able to put into portfolio accounting systems and things like that for a specific thing, what do you think the value is of having a data warehouse versus local files or PDFs or Excel or having data in all of these silos?
Yeah. For what we did in Pantenix, like it was this small sliver of work that happened once a month, twice a month. So it was very infrequent that they needed the solution to this problem, but it came up. But, even in that, like the onboarding process was so painful because we'd have to get all their accounts. We'd have to figure out how to get all their stuff into our system. And if there was a way that it could be centralized, and if there was a way that the data could be accessed more easily. And to say another way, like if the advisors or the RIAs actually owned their own data, that process of onboarding and that process of doing something new with your data wouldn't be as hard as it was. Because if they actually could just come and say, hey, here's all of our accounts, and then it could easily just come into one system and be used, that would be much easier than the pain that we would have to go through for onboarding. And I think that, like I said, what we solved was so minuscule and so infrequent. But there's so much stuff that people encounter every day, like every single day operating their business, every single day as an executive or advisor that they can't do because they don't have the control over their own data. And I think that there's so much value that can be driven for decision making and all the stuff that we're working on here because they've taken control of their data.
Mm. Well, let's talk about that a little bit too, because I think one message that we really like to push here at Milemarker is owning your data, and you effectively own your data by having your own cloud infrastructure that the stuff that lives inside of all of these tools gets pulled into. But there's a lot of firms out there that would say we're already in the cloud, right? The tools that we use are cloud-based. Everything we do is cloud-based. We have Office 365, that's cloud-based. We have SharePoint, that's cloud-based. Our portfolio accounting tool is cloud-based. They use AWS and all of we're completely cloud. We don't do anything, local server. So how would you respond to somebody who says that when we say, sure, but you still need to get your firm to the cloud and you need to get your firm to a place of true data ownership?
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's definitely a sense that maybe the tools you're using are on the cloud, but your firm on the cloud is definitely a different question. And I think we kind of graduate beyond the cloud to get out of the stale Excel files and get into a living and breathing footprint of your business that is constantly updating and changing. That, you can't really have unless you have your data going into somewhere new. So I think you could say, I'm on the cloud, but there's really so much more that we're driving in terms of not having to worry about out of date files that you're looking at, not running your business from an Excel file that's 3-4 years old that, who knows what would happen. God forbid you lose it. There's so much more that we enable for firms that is truly cloud native through Snowflake and the technologies that we use. It's about having your data not just trapped in Excel files or in one of your vendors' databases, stuff like that. Yeah.
So I'm going to talk about a specific use case on that because I think it's still a little abstract for people to think about. Okay, I'm getting my firm to the cloud, it's native. But we have a client where they were trying to do something that seems relatively simple. I want to look at all of my assets and net new flows by, the state of Texas, filtered by this. And, that even putting that into an Excel spreadsheet was extremely difficult for them and painful. But we were able to do it pretty quickly. Why does something that seems so trivial like that, why is that so hard for a firm to accomplish today without being in the cloud or without having Milemarker?
Yeah, because first of all, the way they've honestly operated their business is that requires at least two sources of data. So say all your client demographic data is inside of your CRM, your Salesforce, age, place of residence, etc. And then all of your financial data is largely in your portfolio accounting system. But then there's some very important parts that are in your custodian. So now you have three footprints of data that are required to understand this. And so, like, in the traditional older approach, you might tell that CEO, hey, that's really noble that you want to operate your business that way, but too bad. Like, it's not worth the expense of time and energy to actually be able to present that to you. So I'm glad that you want to think this way, but it's impossible. Whereas what we turn that around and we say, that's great. Like, the exact way that you want to be operating your business, the exact kind of questions you think are important to answer, we can facilitate that because we have the raw data. And I think more and more, it's actually very easy for me or people in this company to take it for granted what we've enabled for people. But the more I see the success story, and I'm sure it's the same for you, the more you actually see what's been enabled, you realize, like, practically there's really no way you could have done it through Excel, because a lot of times, like, there's files that we get that are like more than 100,000 rows, which you can't even open in your Excel. So we're able to present stuff where the size of your data, it prevents you really from doing it any other way.
Yeah, we had a client who I asked them, we had wrapped up a implementation for them. And I said, hey, if it wasn't for Milemarker, how else would you have solved this problem or something? I said, I wouldn't even have tried. I would not have even have tried. And, their business is so much better off because of that. To your point, I mean, I think they were just like, that just felt like this insurmountable task, which is crazy. So this is all well and good. Client wants to get to the cloud. They want to be cloud-based. They want to do some of the stuff we're talking about. But there's a lot of fear out there of, if I go to the cloud, isn't that really expensive, right? These compute charges and all of these fees and all of that stuff, you're putting all my data in there. Isn't that going to get really expensive? And how am I going to be able to control that? I think that's a big question we get a lot. And, people hear some scary numbers about AWS fees and charges and stuff like that. And they feel like it's a little bit of a blank check. So how would you respond to that type of question?
I think that it's very easy to architect your data environment in a way that is expensive. I mean, it's really actually quite easy to do that on accident. So there is some prudence in wondering that question, I would say, for sure. But I would say the proof for us is really quite the opposite. And that's through engineering resources and taking our time and planning. We're able to be very judicious with how we're using compute, and the way that we've built stuff, it is, not break the bank. And I know you and I were just talking about it today, that we've been able to find ways to reduce our expenditure on compute even as we've grown, which is really surprising. But we take it really seriously to be able to give people, value. If we're taking too much money, then we can't give people valuable pricing.
Yeah, totally. All right. This is going to all parlay into a big question that I know happened. Well, I joke with a lot of our clients, they get into this business. So, not too dissimilar from your story, but they get into this business to help people with planning. And, they thought they were going to help people figure out how they were going to save for retirement and for college and for vacation homes, and that they were going to do asset allocation and they were going to do all of this. And then all of a sudden they get in these conversations about cloud and data warehouse and, technology. And the joke we make a lot is that they've become accidental CTOs, right? They got into this to be advisors. They became business owners. And now all of a sudden they're an accidental CTO. From where you sit as a non-accidental CTO, what do you think are the signs of someone who has ended up in a place where, they're spending way too much time with their technology and they've become an accidental CTO?
Yeah, it's really amazing. I mean, a lot of these businesses that we serve are really successful, and they're doing many millions in revenue. And it's definitely a very interesting and intelligent question. Do we need a CTO? And I think a lot of firms that we work with, it's usually the CEO, honestly, that we work with who has become an accidental CTO. And I definitely think that at some point, it's not so much about the cost of your tools, like how am I going to reduce my Salesforce expense? How am I going to reduce my whatever expense? But I think it's more about enabling your people to function better. And I think here we're doing more and more about inviting firms to not think about this as a way to consolidate costs, but as a way to really be far better at making decisions and operating your business. And I think that what I would say to someone who finds themselves as the accidental CTO, like from this position of this company, Milemarker, I don't know if I'm going to be here and tell you about how to analyze all your Microsoft licenses, analyze all your whatever licenses, and come up with a way to cut costs there, because I think that's very important. But what we're doing here as a help to your technology footprint is enabling you to see and understand your business in ways you've never done before. And that requires very sophisticated technology. You know, what we're building and the frontiers that we're touching are really advanced. And I think that it's not like you should be spending time with clients. You should be spending time with the people who you serve. That's really the point. I think being able to trust what we're doing in order to better enable outcomes for your advisors is better.
Yeah, I think that's great, man. I think too, it's more and more advisors are outsourcing asset management to people who, they have the time to stay on top of all the regulatory changes and everything that's happening, and they can just trust that these people are building great strategies and great portfolios. I think outsourcing is going to continue to be a trend for advisors, and I think they should totally outsource a lot of the technological aspects. I mean, because for better or for worse, it is for RIAs. It's not just okay, what portfolio management system and CRM and planning system and all of that do I pick, but okay, how do we handle cybersecurity, right? Huge amount of work to be done on the cybersecurity side, as well as how do I stay innovative and how do I make sure that I'm pushing the firm forward with all the other things we're talking about. What's your take on, should they have an internal resource who kind of oversees all of this technological stuff? I mean, IT, wealth technology to help make their firm more efficient, and then innovative projects. Should they outsource it completely? If you were going back to your roots and you started an RIA today, how would you think about technology as an RIA leader?
I think if you could afford it, I think you should have someone internal. And I think that like what happens for successful projects for us is when you have someone who understands your data really well, the probability of having a faster outcome with Milemarker is, I think, substantially increased. And I look at that as a proxy for anything you're trying to do to move your business forward. If you can have an internal resource, I think that it is definitely worth it.
I love it. All right. So we've talked about the importance of owning data. We've talked about the importance of, how to approach technology as a firm. You can't go anywhere right now without the discussion of AI. And I know that you used AI at Pantenix, now Orion Vision, and it's only evolved from there with Gen AI and large language models and all of this type of stuff. But everybody's trying to figure this out right now. I have a bunch of questions about this, but I kind of want to just give you an open microphone to start and say, what are your general thoughts on AI and how it's trending for the wealth management industry?
Yeah, I think that we talk about it obviously here in Milemarker. This is perhaps the most self-serving conclusion, but you must have your data in one place in order to really make use of AI, because the conclusions that the model can make or the recommendations, it's all subject to what data is presented to it. So the whole issue of having fragmented data, or really not even having the possession of the data itself, means that what the models can recommend or what they can do is very limited. I think there's great stuff, for example, happening with like digital assistant on the calls, but it's just the call, 30 minutes, 1 hour, whatever happens within there, it's able to do excellent job. But in terms of operating your business and helping with someone do their day to day, you must have the data in order to really create actionable decisions for the models. I would say that the cost of operating these models is dramatically decreasing, and the tooling around it is dramatically increasing. And I think definitely by the end of this year, here at Milemarker, we're going to be doing some really, really amazing stuff to enable insight on data through language models. It's something that we attempted a few months ago, but it just wasn't there yet. Very simple things was tripping it up, but I was just looking in the last few days and a lot of that has been addressed. So I think we're going to see some really amazing ways to analyze and understand your business through your data.
Yeah. What do you think about firms trying to deploy their own models, language models, things like that, versus leveraging what the big boys are building, the Microsofts with, I'm a Office 365 user, I'm a full Microsoft shop. Should I just put Copilot in, our business and leverage that? And obviously all of the other incremental point solutions like we talked. I mean, you've got these note recorders and you've got content marketing AI and you've got all, but what do you think about a firm trying to deploy their own language model using, obviously they're not going to go hire engineers to build their own language models, but I'm sure there's ways that they could deploy that versus leveraging OpenAI or Microsoft or AWS or Meta or any of these others?
Yeah. I mean, doing it yourself, really like a true DIY, seems like a very steep hill. I'm not sure that the engineering cost, time cost would even come close to anything that you want from there. So I would say the core competency for most RIAs, maybe like the top 1%, maybe some really huge ones could look into procuring their own model and seeing what they would want from it. But honestly, I would say the space is moving so fast that it's better you put that risk on someone else, honestly. You know, like firms that have trusted us, they're going to get some really good benefits because we made mistakes, frankly. Like we tried doing stuff, it was too early. And it's better for them if we're the ones discovering that versus them kind of putting the time and energy into it,
Yes. We have a client who texts me, and I love getting these texts. They'll send me like a link to an article about AI, and they just go, "Are you guys doing this for me?" ? Which I love getting those questions, right? And the answer is either like, "Yes, we can," or "We will be. Don't worry about it. I'll let you know when we can." I love those questions because that is an advisor who, by the way, is growing crazy fast, or a firm that's growing crazy fast that is doing exactly what you just said, which is letting us worry about those problems, and they are worrying about the things that that is within their circle of genius. And I think that's great.
This podcast is brought to you by Turncast. We make game-changing content for fintech and financial services companies. Learn more at turncast.com.
Hey, this is Judd Mackerel. Thanks for listening to this show. I just wanted to ask you one question. What's your technology and data strategy for 2025? If you can't clearly answer that question, I'd love to talk. We are spending some specific time with select firms to really go deep and help you clearly answer that question. We believe that it's one of the things that often holds back firms from really achieving their potential, from really achieving growth, and really getting a lot of the things in the position that they need to be. The things that are holding up the way that you scale, like your workflows, how you manage data around your revenue, how you report all of that to your advisors, and getting clarity in all those things. I'm sure there's a lot of very specific things to your business that are really important as well, and we'd love to talk about that. If this is interesting to you, hit me up with an email. My direct email is jud@milemarker.co, and I'd love to hear from you, hear what you're working on, hear what your strategy is, and see if there's an opportunity for us to help you get more clear on that strategy in 2025. Thanks.
So bringing back to why it's important to have all of your data in one place for this type of stuff. I mean, I think it's is it as simple as, what we were talking about before of trying to bring a spreadsheet together or having multiple footprints of data, and then trying to apply AI to that. So first of all, you have the problem of just bringing data together. Now, if you try to apply AI to that problem before without having the data centralized, I mean, it's just a non-starter, right?
Yeah, it's the same problem, right? You need an interface to your business. And if your business is legitimately using 3, 4, 5 different products to conduct business, it has to be consolidated in order to do what we're talking about. And artificial intelligence models is no exception. Like you must put them into one place as best you can in order to give it the highest probability of giving you actionable insights or meaningful choices. A lot of the stuff we're looking at in terms of agents, like we want to start making agents. I don't know if this is selling too far beyond the puck, but we want to make agents that can do account opening, for example, right? That's something that Milemarker is very interested in doing. And so in order to do that, if you need different data sources to do account opening usually, and you probably do, right? You need your custodian for your master account number. You need your portfolio accounting system to create the account, et cetera, et cetera. You're going to need it for this model too, right? So it's really making higher levels of efficiency on these workflows that happen in 4 or 5 different places already.
Yeah. One thing that just gets me so excited is, we were in a meeting the other day and being able to just highlight how we are the platformless platform, right? Like we are agnostic to whatever is underneath it, whatever custodian, whatever portfolio accounting. We are just trying to create this layer that is fully the firm's layer that sits on top of it, especially as the world continues to consolidate. More firms are multi-platform. They're not just multi-custodial. We are in a multi-platform world now, multiple portfolio accounting solutions, multiple CRMs, multiple planning systems. That's the reality of a majority of fast-growing RIAs. And, for efficiency, for consistency of brand, for consistency of experience, you have to have something that can sit on top of and across all of those platforms. And I think that's what's really unique. And then if you add the AI agent aspect to that can go multi-platform, that's very powerful.
Yeah. I mean, we're onboarding someone now, right? It's like 3 Black Diamonds, 1 Orion, 1 Adapar, 1 Tamarack, and then a bunch of other stuff, right?
And a partridge in a pear tree. Yeah.
And it's like, imagine, okay, so we're going to give them analytics. Now imagine they want to give a consolidated way for all of those advisors to do trades and to open accounts and do et cetera. You got to have something that sees all the data. I mean, it's not even possible unless you have something that knows the state of the entire business.
Yeah. Well, and I think too about that, all of these platforms already have workflows, but when you need multiple things from them, you have to be able to either use an agent to go do the workflow in that platform or be able to pull all of those workflows or the data for those workflows up into one place. Cause you can't have a workflow go 40% of the way in one platform and then try to pick it up and continue it in another one and another one and another one. This is why people say integrations are broken today. These platforms share data about clients just fine, but it's the cross-platform workflows that are basically impossible today because of the way these things are set up.
And I can add to that, the difference between having it in a data lake versus some kind of API integration everywhere is it's queryable. So you can retrieve it in very sophisticated ways. When we talk about our Milemarker, business objects and universal objects, like there's way more flexibility when you actually have possession over it versus data integration through API.
Yeah, that's well said. That's well said. So, one thing that's interesting, and I know this about you, but you are not just technical. You don't just know about how to move the data around, but you know the industry. And I'd love to hear you riff on that a little bit too, because building solutions, especially complex solutions for this space, you can't just be an engineer or somebody who knows how to move data around. I mean, the wealth management industry requires a level of understanding and expertise about how an RIA works, how a financial advisor works, how custodians work, all of that type of stuff. And I know that's one of the big benefits of us and working with the team at Milemarker is even our engineers, speak the wealth management language. But I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about that and why that is a requirement, for lack of a better term, on making these types of initiatives and projects successful.
Yeah. Well, I would say first and foremost, the great thing is that we're led by you and Judd, who know it really well. So a lot of what I do, I think, is seeking to implement Judd's extremely innovative ideas in a pretty innovative way. So I kind of reduce the scope a little bit, but it does require an understanding of how these businesses work, for sure. And it also requires being in the mind of the user. I think any software engineer who's making more than data pipelines, meaning any kind of user-facing application, you need to have user sympathy. And I'm not a sympathetic guy, right? So we have some engineers who are actually sympathetic people as human beings, but so I have to really work to get into the perspective of how these people are operating their books and what they're thinking to get usage out of our platform. But I will say, I don't want to be too negative on our partners, but it's hard, when your job is to work with people and your job is to really be there for people as human beings. It's hard when you have to log into some of these systems and there's 10,000 features and you don't know what to do. And I think for me, the biggest thing that we are making here is building a tool that is advisor centric and executive centric. And that means simplicity. I think above all, the boldness of what we have here is to do less in a way, it's to do less in an excellent way, which is actually very scary because you think when you make 10,000 features, whatever they need to do, they're going to be able to do it in here is kind of the thesis. But the problem is that it becomes hard to use. And our bet that is scary for a business, a startup, is we're actually going to consolidate what you're doing drastically. We've reduced the feature set like by 90% plus, which is hard. And so to know what to include, what not to include, and how it should be laid out is very difficult. And the way you do that though is our user, in my mind, is the advisor, revenue producers, and the executives, versus operation staff and all these people who obviously matter, but their work is going to be done in our platform for those people.
Man, well said. And so that leads me to want to ask you about this, because I think a huge bet we made and a big thesis we have is that we want to be more of a synthesis platform rather than an all-in-one platform. We believe there is space and reason for the portfolio accounting systems and for the planning systems and the CRMs and all of that stuff. Whereas some people have taken the strategy of they're going to build all of that in one platform. Like, it's going to be a CRM, it's going to be a portfolio accounting, it's going to be a custodian, it's going to be, all of these things in one. And again, I think some people said that the solution to a multi-platform world is to build an all-in-one platform, right? So forget all of the multi-platform, come to our all-in-one platform. That's the answer. We said the solution to a multi-platform world is that we build a layer that sits on top of all of the platforms, no matter who they are and what they look like. And, it works. And we kind of are the switchboard that directs all of that. And then we synthesize the data to create a really wonderful user experience. Obviously, talking our book a little bit here, but why do you think all-in-one platforms are just really, really difficult to create great experiences for the end user?
Yeah, because whether we want to admit it or not, even a software application has finite real estate. So you cannot make something that can do everything because you can only present so much to a user at once. And you can only present so much training or so much onboarding or so much usability. It's not possible to do everything because even if your code base theoretically can be unlimited, you can have every single feature in there. In terms of the amount of time people have, their bandwidth to learn new things, it's not possible. So you have to make a choice basically of what user you serve. And I think the other providers have served the operations staff really well. Like you can do anything in Salesforce. You can. But the trouble is like the way that they have to use the real estate to do that, it's hard I think, in my opinion, it's hard for revenue producer, advisor, and executives to do what they want. If you look at Milemarker, I think the simplicity of it is striking. Like it's actually, there's very little on the page, and that's the point. The only thing that's on there is what you really need to do or what you really need your people to be doing.
Well stated. I love that. I also think too, it's very expensive and difficult to build an all-in-one platform, or acquire one or all of that stuff. And then I think, what's challenging is, and this is for people who are evaluating this as a potential customer, but what's challenging is, by the time you finish building one of those aspects, portfolio accounting, which is no small task, now you have the maintenance and you have to, keep up with the innovation. And if you're trying to innovate on CRM and portfolio accounting and planning and trading and all of these different things, I mean, that just takes a lot of resources, a lot of money, a lot of time versus somebody who, if that's all they focus on, right, they're going to be able to kind of go faster and build and build a better solution. So when I look outside of our industry at a company like Stripe, right, people used to go and try and build their own payment stuff for a solution like an Uber maybe would have tried to build their own payment solution before, but they said, wait a second, there is 1,000 people who sit in the Stripe office who all they think about all day long is payments and how to make payments better and compliant and all of that stuff. Why wouldn't we just, pull that into what we're doing and we can focus on what we're great at? I think that is, more and more of what we're trying to see. And if you have the ability to synthesize all of those and pull all of those experiences together and all of those best of breed things, you can create the ideal type of experience.
Yeah.
All right. I want to move into something that we call the Milemarker Minute with you. So this is a series of lightning round questions, aimed to just kind of be fun and lighthearted, get to know you a little bit better. So you ready for the Milemarker Minute?
Yep.
Awesome. All right. First question. If you could travel anywhere in the world you've never been to before, where would you go?
Spain.
Madrid
and Barcelona.
Barcelona and Madrid. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Yeah.
Great answer. I love it. All right. Are you a mountains person or a beach person?
I grew up in Florida, so near the beach, but now I live in Denver, so I got to be a mountain person now.
Best of both worlds, right? What is the best book you've read or listened to in the last year?
Gospel of St. John.
if you were in, so there's like an alternate universe and Kailash is not the CTO of Milemarker and you're not a software engineer. In this alternate universe or alternate reality, what type of career does Kailash have?
Basketball player.
Basketball player?
Yes.
I love it.
But I mean, this is an alternate universe, right?
Yeah. You know what's really funny, man, is I think you're like the third or fourth person when I've asked that question. They're like basketball, but they're like, I'm not tall and I'm not very good at it. But I really wish I was tall and I was good at basketball. It seems like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's the alternate universe. So yes.
I love it. What is the best flavor of ice cream?
Okay. I think chocolate, some variation, chocolate and peanut butter. But, it's easy. I've noticed that more and more innovation has happened in ice cream and then it becomes like too much in a way. Some of the more simple flavors is better.
Okay. You think people are trying to do too much with their ice cream flavors now?
Yeah, I think, and then you just lose it essentially.
I love it. All right, man. Well, that is it. That's the Milemarker Minute. You got through it. This was fun for me. I mean, I get to talk to you about this stuff all the time, but it was cool to kind of put it in a different format. And I hope it was beneficial for the listeners to hear, some of the things about what we're doing, but hearing it from you who's building it. So thanks so much for taking time to come on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's exciting to do it this way.
Of course. All right, everybody, that's been another episode of The Connected Advisor. Please make sure you click follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to this or watching it. And if you'd be kind enough, leave us a review so that more people who've never heard of the show before can find great conversations like the one I just had with Kailash and many of the other guests in the past. But until next time, enjoy every mile.